Welcome everyone to the 38th episode of Conversations with T. This is your host T, and today's guest is someone who I also went to high school with. She's originally from Pakistan and she was a grade above me. We used to see each other often at school, and she was actually one of the friendliest people I've met there. She's a very talented writer and even has her own Instagram page which is filled with her works. I'm so excited to have her on my podcast, and thank you for joining me today, Rameen. How have you been?
Thank you so much for having me. I have been doing really well. Not too well, but like really well in the past few years. The past few months have been hard, but other than that, it's how life is. How
Yeah.
have you been?
I've been all right and busy, alhamdulillah. So for today's episode, it's going to be very interesting and a bit personal. We're going to have a discussion about the topic of fitting in. And it's you know how it's common to hear about people wanting to fit in because they want other people to like them and feel accepted in their communities. But you, however, you were different. You had no desire to fit in and you instead chose to be your authentic self regardless of what other people thought. And personally, this is one of those traits which I really respect because I'm someone who values authenticity. Do you want to share a story with us? And I would personally love to learn more about your experiences. So do you want to go ahead and share a story?
Yeah, yeah, thank you so much. I don't think I think it's more of my armor where it comes off as I'm like trying not to fit in. But the thing is, I am not sure if you're aware, my dad was in the army.
Okay.
And one thing about the army is like every year or 2 years you move around.
Yeah.
So I don't have childhood friends. I don't have
Okay.
like my oldest friend is like 8 years old who I met during my bachelor's.
Okay.
So that's why I think when you grow up going around and as at a young age when you find out that like relationships and connections can be fleeting and they don't have to take over your life,
Yeah.
you you don't feel like you need to fit in because
Yeah.
you know you can like go somewhere else.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think I was a very nerdy kid, like geeky kid growing up, so I would spend 95% of my time in libraries, like summer vacations, winter vacations, breaks, like school breaks, everything. I would just be in the library.
Mm-hmm.
I think I prefer like books over people
Yeah.
because I think I've had really bad experiences with people,
Mm-hmm.
and they've taught me, and I think this is something that I read recently and it really resonated with me. Was during the Vietnam War. I think I shared this on my Instagram, but during the Vietnam War there was this one old guy who would go outside and stand in front of the White House to
Mm-hmm.
protest against the Vietnam War. And
Mm-hmm.
he'll do it like he'll have a candle in his hand and he'll like stand there every day for
Mm-hmm.
over a year. So
Mm-hmm.
this one guy went up to him and he asked him like, why do you come here? Like your effort is not changing anything. And his reply was, I don't want my like I don't I know my effort is not changing anything, but I don't want this world to change my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why I come here, to prove to myself that I am not becoming like these people.
Mm-hmm.
So it
Wow.
really resonated with me.
Oh, okay, okay. So thank you for sharing that. I also admit that when I was in school, I didn't fit in as well, and despite being there for 15 years, making friends was a big struggle for me. I really wanted to be accepted by my classmates, but I I wasn't because I was different. I was in fact bullied for being sensitive, not having a lot of friends, being chubby or overweight, and even being ugly in inverted commas. People didn't take me seriously because I wasn't a popular kid, nor did I hang out with the popular people. I didn't do drugs, I wasn't into dating, etc. I remember actually being friends with certain individuals before they joined our school, and they were actually quite nice to me. But after they joined, they started treating me differently after they realized that I wasn't popular. They acted as if it was embarrassing to be seen talking to me, and that really hurt me. The bullying and ostracization affected me to the point where I actually developed mental health problems later on in my life. My experiences contributed to me developing PTSD and depression, and it wasn't
Oh, I'm
easy.
sorry.
And I'm sorry.
No, no, I'm really sorry you had to go through that.
Oh no, it's fine. It's fine. It happened for the best. It wasn't easy, and I left school being this very psychologically damaged individual. I actually ended up seeing several professionals for my issues, and it took me years for me to feel more confident and positive about myself. I'll also admit another thing, those people mistreating me led me to have this cultural identity crisis. For a long time, I felt so confused and lost because despite growing up in Bangladesh, I felt so judged and alienated by my society. Most of the people who didn't treat me right, by the way, they were unfortunately Bangladeshi, and this resentment and anger towards my community kept building up inside of me to the point where I actually considered abandoning my culture in totality. I ended up losing a lot of respect for the Bangladeshis in my society because after what I'd experienced, I really couldn't look at them the same way. And I also discovered that I was a quarter Afghan and Pathan 2 to 3 years ago, and that honestly felt amazing. I started embracing this side of me more by becoming more familiar with Afghan culture, learning how to speak Pashto and buying clothes and jewelry. And even today, this is like a way for me to get away from my Bangladeshi culture and identity, if that makes sense. I
No, I do. I completely understand that. It's I think I've gone through bullying as well, and I think at that point, obviously, when you're going through it, you don't think about the person who's bullying you, you think about yourself.
yeah,
But recently I was talking to a friend of mine, and she was saying, imagine how damaged and how insecure those people themselves had to be
right.
in order to take it out on you. The reason why people put down others or like they bully others is because they feel insecure of those people.
Mm,
Like I remember you were like mashallah mashallah, you're still like you're very smart, but I remember back in school you were very smart, you're very kind. Like these are attributes we say, oh, a person should have these attributes, but we ostracize people based on these attributes as well because not everyone has this, and
mm,
they just like it's their insecurities that speak through it. Now, I know I as much as I think it's in no way saying any like I'm not sympathizing with the bullies because
yeah,
obviously I hate bullies, but
yeah.
then I think thinking about this made me feel better about myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like it helped me see that okay, like those people, they did not know me, they felt threatened by me. So like
Mm,
maybe there's something in me, and it helped me embrace myself outside of my cultural and like social entity,
mm-hmm.
like which really helped because yeah, it's I think in Bangladesh as a Pakistani I was bullied. So
Oh,
my brother,
I'm so sorry. Like this
no,
is
no, no, it's completely fine.
this.
It's hard when you're going through it, but when you look back, I think it's just you can either let the past change you, like make you a harsher person, or you can just accept that as a life lesson
Exactly.
and like, try and not to delve too much into it. I know it's easier said than done because like I only went through it for a brief time period. You went through years of it. But it helps if you think of yourself as someone who was someone better than them,
Mm-hmm.
and that is why you were targeted, and that is why you were bullied,
You know what I
and that
find?
is always the case.
And you know what I find interesting? When whilst the bullying happens, like you think, oh, what's wrong with me? And you would think that it's all my fault. It's all my fault and everything's about me, whereas nothing's wrong with them, etc. But after we grow up and we mature, we start to realize that it's actually the opposite. It wasn't so much about us, rather it was them. They were the
That, yeah,
insecurities.
exactly. I think So I went through like, yeah, so this is something that not many people know about me, but I went through therapy, like I went to a counselor for a few months,
Mm-hmm.
and she really helped me see the fact, like she really helped me see that, okay, like if I'm like in any situation, I'd like think about, oh, what will my parents say, what will the people say, or what will society say, like, you know, thinking too much about my cultural stuff, like my cultural social obligations. And she was like, no, because this sort of mentality is wrong. You need to accept yourself as an individual.
I was just thinking about when we were talking about being ourselves and whatnot. Do you think a lot of people love the idea of being authentic, but very few actually do that? Like a lot of people don't practice what they preach, basically.
Yep. I think it's a, how do I say it? It's basically, the problem with that is, it's like we have TV shows, we have movies that like sort of like show, oh, you need to be authentic, oh, quirky is nice, so it's all that. But in real life, it's sort of like you it can be very lonely. It can
Yeah,
be very lonely if you're authentically yourself, if you have your values that you cherish over relationships, then you are not going to have a lot of relationships. I can count, like I've lived in the UK for 2 years, like 2.5 years almost, and I can count on one hand, like I can literally count, like I have 3 4 friends only over here.
really.
And yeah, so it's because I am very happy. I think for me, quality is always over quantity. These
Mm-hmm.
individuals in my life, I know I can call them at like 2 a.m. I can be in any problem and I know they'll have my back.
Mm-hmm.
They've proven that, and I have proven that for them. But then it's like a lot of people are like, they don't, they want people around them.
Mm-hmm.
They cannot, they say, oh, you need to be authentic, but then being authentic means, like, you know, accepting the fact that people might not like you.
Exactly.
And that is something that a lot of people sort of like struggle in.
Yeah. And I think the Gaza situation is a very good example of this.
Yes.
Many people, they're putting their reputation, education, careers, and even their mental health at risk, but they continue to spread awareness and speak up about what's happening in Palestine because it's the right thing to do. And but there are other people who didn't who just stayed silent about this entire matter, and they start looking at those people who actually did something about the situation strangely, and they may even pass comments such as, oh, they're doing too much, or they're being overly emotional, etc. But I just wish these people could understand that it's not easy to do the right thing, and if they want to look down on other people for doing just that, then I really don't know what else to say. Like, what are what do you think? Like,
I
um,
think it's, I've had these discussions with, I have a very close friend, and I think back in October, like mid-October, like I was posting a lot. And I think I can, like, the situation that's happening, and I've read about this as well, like those people, obviously I am not going to compare what we are going through with what people in Gaza are going through, because obviously that is so much worse, because they're living through a genocide, but we are live watching a genocide happen.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that can, I cannot tell you how mentally stressful it was. Like I had, there were 4 weekends straight where I had like migraines because I would cry all the time. I could not leave my house. Like I'd just go outside, like I'll walk on a street, I'll see people laughing and it'll just trigger me and I'll start crying on in the middle of the street. So I've had like, so one of my friends, she called me and she's like, how are you doing, and like, is everything all right? And she's like, if it's so hard for you, like why don't you just like take a step back and like focus on your mental health? And then she's like, and she did not know about like the whole situation. She thought like 90% of the people, it started on the 7th of October. So I gave her a history lesson, and my aim of doing this, it's to raise awareness, to educate people. It's and also, like I said, like what I said initially about the Vietnamese man, no, sorry, the guy in front of the White House during Vietnam War. I do not want that. I did the same thing, and I think this is what I tell people when they're like, oh, you're being too much, you're posting too much. I did the same thing when the war broke out in Ukraine. I did the same thing when a few states in India banned hijab in schools. I have, like, for me, I do not selectively apply my energy to something, but if something like if I think Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I am the most vocal person. Like when I go back home, not many people like talking to me because I am highly critical of my own country as well. So
I
I
could
do
do the
not
same
like.
about myself.
Yeah. So I think that the problem is, and I've had like a few people tell me that they're like, oh, because see, you have a lot of knowledge, but like when you're explaining your knowledge, you get like really hyper, and you're like, your pitch goes up a little when you're explaining things if the other person's not understanding it. And I was like, listen, this is something that is, I, I cannot trust a person who's talking about a genocide with a straight face. I cannot trust someone who can talk about these things and be like, oh, you need to be calm. You need to speak with a calm voice. I cannot. This is personal because it's like I see myself in those people. And I said this to someone, and they're like, you did not just say that, but I said, why are those people being discriminated against? One of the reasons is the color of their skin. It's white supremacy. That's all. That's behind this. So I said, I see myself in those people because they are dusky and I am dusky. And they're like, you did not just like say that. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, British ruled over us. They created this identity crisis in us because of color. And now you're like, there's one country, like there are different countries where this is not happening. And you're creating the same crisis in those countries. It's like it's still white colonialism, like colonization, white supremacy, as Winston Churchill put it. I think my problem is the way my my way of control over things is I research. I cannot tell you. I've read the entire international humanitarian law. I've read the rights of the belligerent occupier as well as the rights of the occupier, like occupied, that they're occupying. I have read. So I did not. Somebody once said, "Oh, like have you read Hamas Charter? They hate all Jews." So I read Hamas Charter. I read Ludic Party's charter, like Israel's ruling party, their charter. I've read every peace accord that has happened since 1967. So like when I'm talking to someone, I'm like, I give these examples, and they're still like, oh, you're being too passionate. And I'm like, I have history. I have like facts backing me up. It's very frustrating when people are like, oh, I heard on the news, like it's just like it started, but Hamas, everything is but Hamas. And it's really frustrating for me as a human, as a Muslim, as someone. And I think Bangladesh is one of those countries as well. I am so sorry. I think I jump from points to points a lot.
It's cool.
But there are a total of 5-6 countries in the world that have not accepted the creation of Israel as legitimate. Bangladesh is one of those countries. Pakistan is one of those countries. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but in your passport, because in my passport it says, and I think I found out about Palestine, like Pakistan has been very vocal about Palestine. I found out about Palestine when I got my passport, because, and if I show it to you, because I do have my passport in my drawer where I'm sitting, it says on the very top that this passport can be used to travel. This passport is valid for all countries of the world except Israel.
The same
And
thing
that
was said in
made
my
me,
passport.
sorry?
The same thing was said in my passport.
Yeah. So I read that and I was, I think, 13, 14 when I got my passport. So I read that and I was like, oh, that is interesting. Why not? And then I like found out about like Israel, Palestine. So I've like, it's personal for me because I didn't find out about it on the 7th of October. I found
Exactly.
out about it. Yeah, and it's annoying when people are schooling, like people are like, oh, so you knew about this, like, it started on the 7th of October. There are two different things. And I'm like, no, it's not. If you read the history, I had someone I was talking to, someone, because I don't want to name names. I was talking to someone and I said, I'm like, I had a migraine, and they were like, this is like a British person, and they were like, oh, and he was concerned about me, like, so he was like, oh, did you take medicines? And I think it's because you drink a lot of coffee and not water. And then I was like, oh no, it's because of what's happening in Palestine, like, I get a lot of migraines these days. And then he was like, oh, he's like, I hope you're okay. And I was like, my problem is it's very personal for me because I've known this for a long time. And Pakistan has, like, Pakistan has supported Palestine, like, on every international forum.
Mm-hmm.
His reply was, so did you know about Hamas?
Oh,
He, like, this attack that happened. So did you know about that? And I was like, I was just floored. I cannot tell you the I told him, I was like, Pakistan has supported Palestine, and his instinctive response as a white British male was, so you knew about Hamas? And I was like, it's very frustrating. I think for most things, I do ignore these things. Like, I ignore.
it gets frustrating at a point. It gets really
Yeah,
frustrating because you just can't take these people seriously anymore. And
you can't. But and I think this is where I would say leadership matters, because in my company where I am working, I have been given that accommodation. I have been given that space
mm-hmm.
to to show solidarity with Palestine, to be vocal about Palestine,
Mm-hmm.
and not feel repercussions. The reason why I'm highlighting this is because in a world where people are being fired, where people are being discriminated against in their workplaces, there are places that are supporting their employees as well.
Yeah. Okay,
So
Rameen.
I think, yeah. Sorry.
And it's fine. You're saying?
And I think that does show you that there is hope in the world. It's just the top companies, like top media companies, top arms companies, like companies that are profiting from what's happening in Gaza right now,
Mm-hmm.
are the ones that are, like, doing all of this.
Yeah.
Everywhere else in the world, like, you see people coming to the streets. And I think London had, like, for the past 4 or 5 weeks, London has had, like, very huge marches. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think the first one broke records as well. In New York, I think in New York, I'm not sure which city in London, UK, US, but they broke the records of, like, Black Lives Matters march. So they are breaking records of, like, people coming on the street, people doing this. So it's not, I think it's also important to notice that even though people are being discriminated against, there are still so many people being vocal about it. And I, like, if I post something, I post it for those people. I posted because I know that I am in a very privileged position, and I have a duty to educate people. And my aim is, if I can educate, I swear, when my friend called me and she was like, oh, I did not know about the history and everything that happened. Just like, so I'm like, thank you for educating me. And I was like, that made me so happy, because that is all I want to do, raise awareness.
Mm-hmm.
But that awareness, again, I think, how do I put it nicely, because it's not a very nice thing, but I know someone, and that person did his dissertation, bachelor's dissertation, on Israel Palestine conflict. And he, to my face, made so many, but then he's also a white European. So, but he to my face said, no, like from the river to the sea is calling for genocide, and it's like it's hate phrase. And then he also said that if Israel stops right now, Hamas will attack Israel. So Israel like has the right to do all of this. And this was someone who has done like it's so I pointed out the fact that he did his bachelor's in this because this is someone who has done extensive research into this conflict.
Mm.
And yet these were his words. He was the one who pointed. He's the one who said, oh, Hamas charter calls to kill all Jews. And to him I said, I do not know enough about this to like make a comment at this point. And then I went back and then I read it all up, and now I'm like waiting for an opportunity to have a discussion with him and be like, oh, did you read this? Did you read that? You asked me to read it. I did read it, and you were wrong. But at the same time, I think it's that you can educate as many people as you want, but you cannot give them the intellectual capacity to see injustice, because these are the people who have it's still call that colonized colonizer mindset.
Yeah.
So they even though they see it, they comprehend it, they still cannot accept that, oh no, what's happening is an injustice against Gaza, because saying that would mean you're calling out colonizers.
Mm.
And it's also, I think, sorry, I know our time is running out, but I think it's very important to notice that Israel gets a lot of leeway because it uses Holocaust as an excuse to get away with everything, which we saw, I think, 2-3 weeks ago in the United Nations when Israeli delegate pinned a Star of David to his coat saying, we survived the Holocaust. Just because you survived one genocide doesn't mean you did not. Your ancestors did, but you did not. And this does not give you a free hand to commit a genocide against other people.
Yeah. All right, Rameen, thank you so much for
Uh-huh.
taking part in my podcast. It was so nice catching up with you again. Time is running out,
Same.
unfortunately. But thank you and take care.
Thank you. You take care.